farm in first land in Iowa City, Iowa. It's 145 acres. It's about 25 acres of timber. The rest of it was just bare GMO soybean fields, bare soil. And we started from scratch, no infrastructure, no well, no power, no house, no barn, no high tunnel, no nothing. Let it be known, I mean, we're super early stage here. We're less than 3 years in on this particular site. Brought in a lot of propagated stock from elsewhere beforehand, but very early stage. Permo on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. So if you want to see this polycultural permaculture stuff happening on the web with images, not just from my site but elsewhere, you can search that oftentimes and see a lot more stuff. This is what we're shooting for. This talk is about farm-scale permaculture, so it's about permacultural systems that are scaled up to be food producing for lots and lots of people. Replicate of a lot of our farms. So what you're seeing here is a linear or a curvilinear guild system. So you're seeing multiple species of plants that are planted together, but it's done via replicate, so it's repeating. So silvopasture, this is the most simplistic definition of silvopasture you can see. This is in Georgia, this is loblolly pine, grass, and cattle, right? So it's trees and pasture. That's the definition of silvopasture. But silvopasture can be a lot more than that, and that's what we're trying to implement. Silvopasture for human beings, if you have a silvopasture that's incorporating both a tree element and a livestock element, are you managing that just for the livestock, or are you managing that for human use, right? You can choose between those two. Or you can just focus on the livestock, right? Now with that, if you're choosing between a silvopasture focusing on livestock or silvopasture for humans, your energy flows are totally different, right? It's way more intense for human consumption than it is just for livestock, right? But if you put that intensity on the highest value, okay, I want to have apple trees in my silvopasture, and I want to pick all the fruit that I can for dessert fruit for human consumption, $4 a pound certified organic, then your waste products and your drops are that livestock element. So you're still utilizing the full resource base, but you're focusing on that front side element, right? If you're two people into your 60s or 70s, maybe you have less of an energy input that you can give, and you want to focus more on the livestock, right? But it's just a continuum, and you manage accordingly. So we're focusing on this on the front side, and if we decide not to wake up for 6 months, this is what will happen in the long term. So a very brief explanation of keyline is that you see the black lines on there? Those are topographic elevations. The red lines are a way to essentially capture water on the contour and ideally migrate it towards the ridges at about a 1% slope around the hill, and then sink it in the ground. The whole entire keyline layout in about 6 hours. 2 of the hours was the tractor sitting still, doing nothing. So it took about 4 hours to do 40 acres. So if you hire myself or anybody else to go lay out a keyline arrangement on your field with old school laser levels and flags, there's no way you can do 40 acres in that kind of time, much less install it, lay it out. It's just insane how fast it goes in. Again, accurate within 1 centimeter from space, completely repeatable. There's a rear view, obnoxious horsepower abuse. Cost me $500 a day flat to run the tractor, $50 an engine hour beyond that, blah, blah, blah. Cost $30 an acre to put it in. So here's I went back into those rips with my 1960 Oliver. You see how that was the wheel patterns into a bare alfalfa field. And then we followed the rip with this old school tractor, planting trees into it with a pretty ironclad tree transplanter. These are all propagated 24-inch tall whips. I'll talk about how cheap you can put in a silvopasture too. So a year before this was GMO soybeans. The next year it was alfalfa, and now it's just crazy polyculture of trees and stuff. This is how it looked a year ago. So tree shelters and everything, grazing livestock in the alleyways, and it was done. Whole thing, $65 an acre. Agricultural livestock are not confinement livestock. They're the opposite of that, right? Peter Allen is a friend of mine. He's doing really cool stuff in the driftless southwest Wisconsin area. If you look at his herd of cattle versus anybody else's that's backgrounding for the feedlot, they're totally different animals. One advantage is that a lot of the permaculture livestock that are better adapted to less management and less infrastructure are really cheap. So they're really adapted to live outside with no structure. You know, they're not going to get burned by the sun. They don't need to be saying hello to every day, and they root naturally and raise naturally. The Kuni Ossabach cross gives us reasonably short-snouted animals that graze grass and clover, so they're less prone to root. So they're not, automatically seeking to destroy your fields, which is pretty cool. So they're unringed. There's no physical human intervention of putting a metal hook through someone's nose so they don't, express their natural behavior. So that's cool. So we're not feeding any grain. They do get compost treats every now and then. That includes some bread when it's at the co-op free. But they can survive year-round on pasture. They're leaving one paddock and going to the next. They're going to have a little bit of disturbance, bare soil. If you can seed on top of that, and then with pigs, you don't want to have them back in the same spot for 45 days to break that cycle of pests and stuff. It takes about 45, 60 days to get a turnip, It's a reasonable size, maybe a little longer. So you can revisit that, and then they've got that root crop right there too. Do we do that nearly enough? No, but we should.
Are they in the fields with your tree saplings?
Right now they're off to the side, but they're usually in the alleyways, yeah.
And they don't touch your trees?
Electric fence. Oh, they're trained to it. Yep. Premier One quick fence, about 30 inches tall. The tillage and the labor it takes to produce grain, even for small-scale livestock production, is not sustainable in a permaculture context, in my opinion. So you need to be able to select species and breeds that can thrive on forage, not purchased or hauled in anything, right? So here's the Icelandic chicken. It's bred to be presumably cold weather hardy, but it's still looking for grain, So what do you do to get around that? I'm a believer in, what's in your biome, what's around you right now. Are turkeys hanging out? Are geese hanging out? Yeah, they're making a go of it. They actually eat grass. They don't need to have grain purchased from the co-op and cracked and hauled in and fed to them every day. So I have to actually look at what's the highest net revenue I can do, like per crop, right? So hay was great, but now hay prices have taken a dive and hay sucks, right? So, what do you have to do in the meantime to make the note? And the long-term plan with tree crops is that, obviously you want to utilize the highest level of value chain you can. So human consumption, right? So chestnuts, retail $6 a pound, wholesale $3 a pound. If you had to dry them and turn them into chestnut flour, that is not a very good utilization of that crop, right? So you're best off marketing that as fast as you can, right? So there's a continuum of that. We talked about layers, stuff like that. That's a knobbed russet apple. That's pretty ugly. Here we've got a sprayed red delicious. So it's a high input fruit. It's a commodity market, right? A knobbed russet is pretty rare. That's $3, $4 a piece, right? We've got a few knobbed russets grafted, but my intention with the farm is we want to have as many grafted varieties of heirloom russet or naturally disease-resistant fruit so we can market them as certified organic dessert fruit. And if they get a little far gone or they get a little beat up, then they become certified organic cider, and then ideally that's direct marketed as well. So if you had to buy apple root stock at, say, $3 a stick for a small quantity, and you bought in signwood at $1, for $4 you've got a $50 tree in 2 years' time, right? If you've got a big tree like a lot of these beauties out here, and you want to sell it to this growing permaculture movement, oftentimes you can sell cyanwood as a yield in the wintertime at $3 a lineal foot and get higher gross revenue from cyanwood sales than you can from fruit sales in the fall. So, and again, like I used to sell heirloom garlic, and most of the sales are to commercial growers, and they're never going to buy from you again because they already have their garlic and they're going to make more. And there's always this fear and this scarcity complex of, if I sell that to someone, I lose it forever. Well, this is kind of a growing movement, and there's a lot of demand out there, so I'm not concerned about proliferation.
Direct marketing, and you just do talks like this, and that's how people hear about you, kind of thing?
I didn't do a single talk at all until like a year ago on this stuff.
Okay.
It's just Facebook, really. You put photos on the internet of stuff that you're doing, and people buy it. This was a dead, bare soil field, right? So 2,4-D and glyphosate means nothing grows. So I'll walk through a very specific timeline here so you can understand it. In April of 2013, it was bare, dead soil that had just been plowed up, right? Planted oats alfalfa mix. So that was a alfalfa, red clover, forage mix with about 10% grasses, orchard grass and timothy, right? So there's no grass pressure at this point in time, okay? Oats came up as a nurse crop, harvested the oats, sold the oats as cover crop seed, so immediate revenue year one. Gave time for the hay to come on. The next year came in and planted these trees directly into this newly established alfalfa field, right? Immediately cut the adjacent hay next to that and then raked it onto that hay to suppress it. So there's no tillage, there's nothing laying out, it's just cutting a slit, dropping trees in a hay field and laying the extra forage to suppress the neighboring stuff. At best, 10% grass, very little grass pressure. If you went into a regular bluegrass lawn and did this, you'd have a lot of grass pressure, right? So you'd have to mulch it or mow the crap out of it. We just use the existing hay to mulch it. This is a tangent, but it's a worthy tangent. So every apple tree that you eat in the store is a grafted apple tree. So that means it's clonally propagated, so they're identical. So if a new pest comes along and you've got 10 red delicious and 10 yellow delicious, they're all dead. If you plant out trees of selected varieties, there are statistically likely to be good fruit, meaning not spitters. There's going to be a little bit of variability there, but in all likelihood it will be a good edible tree, and you're going to have this natural genetic diversity, right? So all of the academics will tell you you need to have 10 Fujis and 10 yellow delicious and 10 Granny Smiths, and that's how you have a diverse orchard. And I believe that you should have 2 knobbed russet, 2 golden russet, 2 wine sap, and a lot more diversity. But furthermore, you need to be planting out seeds from those fruit that have cross-pollinated and growing those trees out so you have that diversity over time. So with our nursery, essentially sell no grafted trees whatsoever. What we do is we grow trees out from selected varieties. So like pawpaws and chestnuts, we collect seed from trial orchards of grafted varieties. So there's a couple different pawpaw orchards around the country that have all these 10 or 15 all the Peterson pawpaws and all these selected varieties. The fruit from that, genetically speaking, statistically speaking, are going to produce really good fruit. So those seeds are grown out of seedlings, and those are the trees that we sell. So if you get 100 trees from me, they're all genetically unique, but they're all pretty damn good. So you never know what you're going to get, but it's going to be from selected stock, which I think is advantageous.